Hey, Algebra 2 Trig, we're doing 6.4, sum and difference formulas. The central question is, how do I use the sum and difference formula to solve expressions? Okay, so before we start, you need to know what the sum and difference formulas are. Okay, so go ahead and write that down, and then we'll start one of the problems. Okay, so the reason why we need sum and difference formulas is because if they're asking for something like find the exact value of cosine of 75, if we're talking about finding the exact value, I want something like unit circle values, but unfortunately on your unit circle you don't have a 75 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the sum and difference formula and convert it to something I do know from the unit circle. So instead of cosine of 75 degrees, I'm going to write it as the cosine of 45 plus 30 degrees. Good. So the cosine 45 plus 30 degrees is 75, and I have a formula for cosine of 45 plus 30. I'm going to look on my sum and difference formula and just follow it. So I'll write it under the first time. It's cosine of u plus v equals the cosine of u cosine of v minus sine of u times the sine of v. So if I follow that formula, it would be the cosine of 45 times the cosine of 30 minus the sine of 45 times the sine of 30. Okay? And then from there I know unit circle values. So the cosine of 45 is radical 2 over 2 times the cosine of 30 degrees, which is radical 3 over 2, minus the sine of 45. The sine of 45 degrees is radical 2 over 2. And the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Okay, and then if I simplify that, this will be radical 2 times radical 3 is radical 6 over 4 minus radical 2 over 4. And then probably want to write it as one fraction, so radical 6 minus radical 2 all over 4. And that is my exact value of cosine of 75 degrees. Okay? All right. Now that you kind of know how to do it, I'll just kind of show you how to break it down in radians if you have something like that. So if I have, say, same thing, same problem, except now they're asking for find the exact value of sine of pi over 12. So if you're trying to find the sine of pi over 12, well, on my unit circle, there isn't a pi over 12. So I want to somehow write it as unit circle values. So instead of writing sine of pi over 12, I'm going to write it as sine of pi over 3 minus pi over 4. Because pi over 3 minus pi over 4 is actually 4 pi over 12 minus 3 pi over 12, which is still pi over 12. And then from there, I just go ahead and follow my sum and difference formula for sine of u minus v. So if I look there, it would be sine of pi over 3 times cosine of pi over 4 minus cosine of pi over 3 times sine of pi over 4. Okay, so if I follow that, sine of pi over 3 is radical 3 over 2. Cosine of pi over 4 is radical 2 over 2 minus cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2 times sine of pi over 4 is radical 2 over 2. And then I'm just going to do some algebra, simplify, so it'll be radical 6, again, minus radical 2 all over 4. Okay? So that's just how to do it in radians. The other problem we might come across is, go ahead and write it down. We're going to do example 2. Okay, so you're going to find the exact value, and again, when you see exact value, you want to think about unit circle value. So we're going to find the exact value of sine of u plus v if sine of u equals 4/5 and u is between 0 and pi over 2, and cosine of v equals negative 12 over 13 if v is between pi over 2 and pi. Okay, so you might not know what that means exactly, but if sine of u is 4/5 and it's between 0 and pi over 2, well, I'm probably going to have to draw a triangle. And between 0 and pi over 2 is going to be in the first quadrant, so I'm going to draw a triangle in the first quadrant. Okay, I know sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so it's 4/5. So that means my third side is 3. It's one of your Pythagorean triplets. Actually, I should probably call this u instead of theta. Okay? And then for v, I can also draw a triangle. I just have to make sure it's between pi over 2 and pi. So pi over 2 and pi is in the second quadrant. So I'm going to call this v. And cosine of v is negative 12 over 13. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent is negative 12. Hypotenuse is 13. So therefore, it's one of your Pythagorean triplets again. It's your 5, 12, 13. And if you really need to find a third side, you might have to use the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so now that I know that, they want us to find sine of u plus v. Well, that's just one of my sum and difference formulas. So sine of u plus v equals the sine of u, the cosine of v, plus the cosine of u times the sine of v. Okay? So you just have to make sure you're looking at the right triangle. So sine of u is this triangle, and the sine of u is 4/5. Well, the cosine of v is this triangle, and cosine is negative 12/13. Plus the cosine of u, so I'm going to look at this triangle because that's my angle u, and that's 3/5 for cosine. And then for sine of v, I'm going to look at this triangle, and sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so it's 5/13. And then have to just simplify a little bit, so this will be negative 48/65 plus 15/65. And if I simplify that, that's negative 33/65. So that is the sine of u plus v given all those criteria. Okay, if you have any questions, go ahead and write it down and we'll go over it tomorrow.